Hi, my name is Sean Blanton, but my friends call me Sean Michael or Run Bum. I've run over 300 ultra marathons. I've been first, last, and everything in between. I started and owned Run Bum Races, where we put on 11 trail and ultra running races a year from Central Florida to Southern Virginia. I hope that with my trail running and race directing experience that I can help you train smarter, run further, and fall in love with trail running. If you find this podcast helpful and or entertaining, please help me out by sharing it. I'd also like to invite you to run or volunteer at one of our mini races. Welcome, friends, to the Bend, Don't Break podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Bend, Don't Break podcast. This week we are talking all things Georgia Death Race. Of course, it is your race director, Sean Blanton, Run Bum, as my friends call me, Sean Michael. Very, very excited for this week's episode. We're basically going to go all things GDR, and we're going to start at the head of the pack from our most elite of elite runners, Andrew Miller, who's won the race 3 times, has a course record, and has also won Western States with several other accolades like we don't have time to mention. Let's start with him, break down his races, his strategy, his training suggestions. He's also a coach. You can hire him as a coach. And then we're going to go to a 5-time finisher. If you finish any of my ultra marathons 5 times, doesn't have to be consecutive years, but any one ultra, you get a jacket with your name embroidered on it. So talk to one of our GDR jacket holders. They are few and far between, but we do have a lot of people on their way to that. So we'll talk to them about their tips, tricks, things that they've learned from GDR over the years. Then I'm going to talk to a good friend of mine, Kevin Sylvie, who's DNF GDR twice, has hired a coach and is training for this year's race with like some new vigor. So excited about that. And then I'm also going to interview somebody who has never run GDR, but this is going to be their first time, and kind of see what they're thinking ahead of time. So we're going to kind of go from first, middle, everything, all things GDR. So let's talk about the history of GDR as your race director and the person who designed this course. This is year 11 for 2023. The first time we even thought about putting on a race, it was actually, we were going to call it Park to Park, okay, to go from Vogel State Park, Vogel State Park to Amicalola Falls State Park. And we're like, this doesn't really sound like, just doesn't have a ring to it, right? And I had recently run the Canadian Death Race, and I loved it, which if you ever get a chance, definitely go check that out. Shout out to Sinister Sports up in Canada. Love you guys. Definitely recommend running that race. But I was like, Georgia needs a death race. I like that, the Georgia Death Race. So kind of changed the name to that. And I had never, ever directed a race before. And I just kind of got tired of going to these places, out west, whether it be California, Utah, Oregon, Washington, you name it. I'd run these ultra marathons, hence the name Run Bum, travel all around and run races and bum it up. But what I found was that people go, you talk to somebody you're running with and you say, hey, where are you from? I was like, Georgia. And they go, oh, wow, long way from home every time, And then the second thing they would say to me would be like, oh, you guys don't have any real mountains there, do you? And I kind of chuckled at it a lot at first, and then I kind of started getting mad about it and kind of had a chip on my shoulder. And that's kind of where this race started from. I think the early years of race directing as well is kind of with a chip on my shoulder. Like, I'm setting out to prove that we have awesome, epic, challenging trails and mountains, in the Southeast. And that's kind of how it all started. And so this whole race, I always tell people, every one of the races that I have is a direct extension of, an exaggerated extension of the human psyche or my personality, and I change, I mature, people change, people mature, whatever. But, at the time, this was kind of like a big, screw you. to West Coast mountain running, if you will, because I was like, we've got hard mountains too. When I go to, no knock on this, I love everywhere and everyone mostly, but when I'd go out west and go run in, say, California, and I'm not trying to pick on California, not every place is the same, but a lot of the trails that I really enjoy running are like very buffed out, hard packed trails that we call them country club trails, and then you come back here and stuff is just really steep and rocky and it's just gnarly, right? Everything's different. We love it all. So it kind of started from there, and I'll never forget like the first year, like going to ask people for permits and telling them, it's like, yeah, I have this thing called the Georgia Death Race, and I promise it's going to be safe. You should let us do this. And 11 years ago was kind of 12 years ago really when we were planning it. There weren't that many races around, and so a lot of these more rural North Georgia areas and stuff like that. And even still, like, this is kind of like Greek to people, and it's like, wait, what? It's such a foreign idea that people can physically go 74, 100 miles plus on foot and be okay, And so trying to explain that to people that may or may not exercise, but, I just never really heard of even people running, like a marathon, to explain to them, oh, it's fine. And so the first year we did it, the whole route was designed to be along the hardest possible trails up in that area, which is the Coosa Backcountry Loop, which if you ever get a chance to do the Coosa Loop, it is awesome. We can't do a race on that because part of it's in a wilderness, the Blood Mountain Wilderness, but we run in the section that's not. And we do like the big Coosa climb, but it is a brutal loop. It's like about 12 miles. And for the longest time, I had the fastest known time for that. And it was so awesome because in the early days, we'd show up to Vogel State Park and they make you get a permit, okay, a backcountry permit, or you're supposed to. And so I'll never forget, like the first time I went and filled this out, like you're supposed to check in and check out, even though you're not in the park for more than like maybe 1/10 of a mile. But when you start this loop, and it's got about, I want to say about 3,500 feet of climbing, maybe same loss, maybe a little more. Somebody could correct me on that. But when you leave the park, you're supposed to, and then you come back, you're supposed to check back in. And I remember, coming back through, after like, 2.5 hours or whatever it was, and coming back and, hey, I'm done. And, they have all these warnings, like, you can't do this in a day and all this stuff like that. And for somebody like me, challenge accepted, right? So I remember going and, running that and coming back in like 2.5, 3 hours, whatever it was. And, people were like, oh, so you decided to turn around? And I said, what are you talking about? Like, I went and ran it. And they're like, ran it? Like, what the heck are you talking about? So it was kind of funny, meeting folks that were like, people just hike that, that's crazy, and being able to expose areas that may not have ever been exposed to people doing crazy things. And I hope that's what this race also does, is it exposes people to like true limitations. And, it's like, I guess it's kind of like, you're not going to go through a door if you don't know that the door is there, right? You're not going to climb up a mountain if you don't know the mountain's there. You're not going to run the Georgia Death Race if nobody has the event. So I hope that this event really helps test limitations, because even though it's only 74 miles, it really is kind of like on that physical limitation of like what you can do in a day. But I'll get to that later on. Now, again, back to us first designing this, we also wanted to use the Duncan Ridge Trail, which is terrible. It is just straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. The trail was actually designed, the 30-mile section of the Duncan Ridge, which we use almost all of that. Part of that is also now the Benton Mackay Trail. But that was all built like 30 miles of trail in a year. And that was built by a lot of people who are part of the Benton Mackay Trail Association, who helped build that trail as well, because they were talking about relocating, or rather extending, the Blue Ridge Parkway further south to where the existing Appalachian Trail was. And so people are like, oh no, we're not going to have the AT there. So they needed to make a reroute. Well, they did that. And instead of building a sustainable trail, it's just, we're going to go straight this way. We're just going to go right up and over this ridge line, the Duncan Ridge, and just go from where we need to go. So from Blood Mountain all the way to Long Creek. So that's what happened. And then it kind of just fell into, people didn't really use it as much, and we love it because it's really miserably hard. So that's kind of where that comes from. And if you didn't know that, and then, we'd love to jump on, which we would never do, but we'd love to jump on the AT and take that to the approach trail and eventually back to Amicalola Falls State Park. That'd make maybe like a 50-mile route. But since legally we can't put on race on the AT, which again, I would not do, we avoid this by jumping on some Forest Service roads at our Long Creek aid station. And you actually come to this big bald area. And in that bald area, it's pretty cool. The Ranger Camp Merrill, they actually do training. And I've seen people, I've been up there, randomly, and people come and rappel out of a helicopter, or they'll land a helicopter, or like a Humvee will come and it's just wild. Randomly you'll see that. So we divert off the Benton McKay Trail there and the Duncan Ridge Trail there, and we jump on Forest Service roads, the Winding Stair Gap. And originally we dropped down just on the road bed, a gravel road, all the way to Nimblewell Church Road, which we took a right on, and you ran that all the way up Nimblewell Gap. And basically, once you got to the original route, once you got to Long Creek aid station, you ran all the way to Amicalola on the road, gravel road and paved road. It was like only 64 miles. And now with all the changes we made, which is way better, we're able to use some trails in the Jake Bull system, which are like multi-use mountain bike and equestrian trails. I actually really like them. They're very runnable. It's very scenic. It's just a nice change of scenery from the straight up, straight down. That part's really cool. So once you hit the Winding Stair Gap, you drop down maybe a mile or two on gravel road, then you jump on a single track pretty much all the way until you're back on Nimblewell Gap Road, and you run a road for a couple miles, really flat, but at that point your legs are pretty beat up. And then we have the famed Nimblewell climb, which is funny because if you went and you're just like, I'm going to run up this Nimblewell Gap, you're like, it's really not that hard. It's really not bad. But considering how many miles are on your legs and how messed up you are at that point, this douche grade hill, as we call it, is terrible. And it's like a 3-mile climb, and it gets steeper and steeper and steeper, and it just winds all around. And most people are doing that in the dark. So it kind of just makes this crazy mind games. And we used to have an aid station up there in Nimblewell Gap itself. But it's just the road is just so messed up. Every year when I'm out there flagging and we're driving in a truck, and it's like, I promise myself I won't ever, I won't do that again until next year if I have to. So we moved that over to the Linfoot hike-in driveway. So once you hit Nimblewell Gap, it's kind of like pretty flat and old road bed that nobody uses anymore. And then eventually we jump onto the Linfoot hike-in trail, which I love. This trail is one of my favorite trails in the world. Big shout out to Eric Graves, director of the Linfoot hike-in, who allows us to come through their property late at night and run through there. You got this nice, I think it's 4.8 miles, or maybe it's 5.2, I forget. Maybe it's 5.8, who knows? But it's a really cool winding, rolling hills kind of trail. It's beautiful, very well maintained, very well used. And then we come into the park. And of course, as you know, we come in on the East Ridge Trail, which actually used to be the old road that you drove up to the falls. So the really steep paved road that you drive, that was actually one way, and you only came down that. So it's like you kind of came up and then down in a car. It's really interesting. But that was only about 15 years ago, and it was drivable in like a Corolla or a Kia. It's fallen to such disarray. It is just like a rock. I mean, all it is just boulders and rocks and stuff. And it's only like a quarter mile like that, but people, if even, people are saying, oh, this is the worst thing ever. This is the worst thing ever. But you have 1,000 foot downhill from the top of the falls, essentially, because Amicalola Falls State Park is shaped like this bowl of a U, okay? And you kind of start up here, and then you drop way down, and then you have to climb up the middle of it, up the falls, another 1,000 feet back up, and on those, up the stairs, which is just brutal, because going up, 700 stairs or whatever it is, 70 something miles in a race is hard. Then you jump on maybe like a quarter mile section of that steep road, and then you're on some really gnarly technical steep downhill trail for that last mile to the finish. It's just like, if you had any inkling of your quads left, they are just destroyed at this point. And of course, as you know, we have a perfectly good bridge you could cross right into the finish line, but we close that off for you, so you have to go through the water, and it's this baptism of cold water at the very end, if you will. And let us not forget, I make everyone carry a railroad spike, and it's why, okay? Well, like I said earlier, every race that I have is an exaggerated extension of my personality, or the human psyche, if you will. This is the remorseful, burdensome, hateful part of, our minds, if you will. And, I think, where does that anger and stuff, it's because you have some sort of unfinished business or something in your past or something that's bothering you, right? And carrying that burden with you, that's what that nail represents. And it's only a pound, right? So like all burdens, though, it gets heavier over time. It's like, you put things off, like put off dealing with things, put off dealing with people, put off doing things, just let things, it will get heavier and heavier and heavier on your back over time until it's just crushing you. Okay. And that's the point of the nail, is that, you may not notice it for the first couple miles, but make damn sure that, that 60 miles in, that's going to be hurting. And people always wrap them in like bubble wrap or like whatever they do, because, it'll chafe your back, it'll bruise you. And like I said, you don't notice it as much at first, but it just gets heavier and heavier. So, and if you don't finish, you have this engraved burden, this spike that you get to keep with you. And again, it will weigh on you until you deal with that unfinished business. One of the guys we're interviewing today, Kevin, has 2 of those. So, and we talk about that, and we've talked about that. And it's very symbolic. So it's people, yeah, but it also sucks, And so when you actually finish, you throw that spike into a coffin that we have, and you get an engraved spike. So it's like, here you go, your burden in the coffin, and here is your reward. So, and immediately it's like the weight is lifted off you. So, and it's really beautiful to see people putting that spike in the coffin, because they know that it's done. Like I felt this all day long. I've thought about this all year long, and now I'm done. I'm finished. It's not just a finish line. It's more than that for this race, for sure. All right, I want to welcome Andrew Miller, 3-time winner of the Georgia Death Race and our course record holder. Not only has he crushed GDR multiple times when it was a golden ticket race, he's also won Western States, won this entry to that from winning the Georgia Death Race, won several other races, has course records, just an awesome guy. His whole family runs. His mom's a race director. She runs ultras. I most recently saw Andrew, I believe it was last summer, at the Ute 100 that I put on, pacing his brother. His brother runs. His dad comes out and supports too. So it's just a really awesome family. well-rounded guy, super nice kid. And I'll never forget the first time I saw this guy running a race I was at. I just saw like his time and I was like, I couldn't believe it. I saw him at the start, couldn't believe it. And then when he came and ran Georgia Death Race, I didn't think it was physically possible for anybody to go that fast. And he was such a young guy. I think you were maybe 19 at the time, something like that, 20?
Yeah, I think maybe 18 the first time I did the death race.
Wow, it's crazy. So anyways, let's welcome Andrew Miller. Andrew, thank you for being on the podcast all the way from Corvallis, Oregon today.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're talking Georgia Death Race. I would love to get into a deeper podcast talking about how you got into running and everything that else that goes with that. But let's just break this down. Like the first time you came to GDR, what drew you to this race and kind of talk about how you trained for that.
Yeah, for sure. So what first got me out to GDR was my friend Kerry Stevens had run the race a few times, or just one time, I think, just one time before I had done it. He's done it a few times now, and he told me I would really like the race. So that's what prompted me to come out there for sure. And then, yeah, I really did like the race for sure. After that first year, that's what kept me coming back, is that I just love the course. I love the community around the race. I've always had a lot of fun out there. So, yeah, I just like coming back. It almost feels like a second home at this point.
That's awesome, man. So I've got to ask you, so like I've seen you like mid-race running, because as when I race direct, I follow the front of the race just to make sure everything's still like marked correctly and whatnot and make sure everything's going well. So I've seen you on some of these grades. Like I want to talk about the Duncan Ridge Trail. So for those people that don't know it, it's a really unique trail in the sense of it's like fall line grades. So it's like 30+% grades, but only for, a couple hundred feet. And then when you kind of crest out on top of like these little peaks on these ridges, it kind of almost immediately goes back down the other way on another steep downhill. So, but I saw something very unique with you. Obviously when you won the races, was that you were actually running that, and no one else that I've ever seen has run that. They've all power hiked that. How do you like, I guess, what is your mentality with that? Do you think you go faster, able to run that and not jack your heart rate up? How do you even train for that? I mean,
yeah, for sure. So I think I've always been pretty good at running up hills. That's definitely one of my strengths. So yeah, I feel pretty comfortable running up hills. So I think that's probably why I run it. I think I can pick up a little bit of time there. And yeah, I guess from a competitive standpoint, I feel most comfortable racing on terrain, kind of like what's on the Duncan Ridge. So since that's at the start of the race, I do try to take advantage of that a little bit and get out in front if I can. So that's kind of worked for me a couple times there. And then the climbs, like you said, they're pretty short. So while you do bump up your heart rate a little bit, you're not kicking it into high gear for too long. So I feel like that's a little bit more manageable. It is so important to kind of manage your effort, though, because there are definitely times when you do get working pretty hard on some of those uphills. So I do pay attention kind of to my breath rate, my perceived exertion, that kind of thing, so as you don't push it too hard. But yeah, it's also something I enjoy, is just running up steep hills. So yeah, you got to have fun out there.
That's awesome. So like back home in Corvallis, like do you have like a favorite hill that that's really steep that you're just doing repeats on, or are you just going out for trail runs?
Yeah, so we have a few pretty steep hills, pretty steep trails. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to the death race in the sense that you just have short pitches that are very steep. So I think having run those for, almost 15 years now, I'm just pretty comfortable with that kind of terrain where you just have short, steep pitches. I'm pretty comfortable running up that stuff just because I do it a lot.
Right. Yeah, because for me with the death race, I think one of the hardest things, I think, in training and for normal people or even elite runners is that there's not a lot of rhythm. So like you said, is like you have these steep pitches, but you're kind of normally like when you run up something, like the point of it is to gain the top of something. And then you're kind of on that for a while. Whereas that first 30 miles, like you're going up and you hit something and you just kind of crest and go back down. Like, so your heart rate is taking these spikes. And if you're not used to being able to transition, I feel like that gets a lot of people in trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say that's one of the toughest parts of the course, especially that early section, is you do have these steep climbs, but then they're also followed by fairly steep descents too. So you come into the climb, if you're working too hard at the top of the climb, you're going to come into that descent. Your legs are going to be feeling kind of weak, just because you've been pushing it so much on the climb. So you gotta be careful to monitor your effort like that, so you don't come into the descents and just blow out your quads in that first 25 miles, because that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah,
you got some tough downhills.
For sure. And what always has amazed me is like anytime I see you running, I'm like, the first thing I say is like, dude, that guy's quads are jacked. Now, do you hit the gym a lot? Are you doing like weights and squats and stuff?
No, I think it's probably just from, I don't know, probably some of it's just my physiology. But yeah, I think doing a lot of downhills. I just like running the hills. Growing up hiking, we would do a lot of hiking, my parents and my brother and myself. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it comes from. It's just doing a lot of hills over my lifetime. So that's where it comes from.
You got a lot of up and down on the odometer. Right on.
Definitely, yeah.
Do you ever train like let's say like today's a Tuesday? Like, do you ever put it on your block for yourself where you're like, okay, I'm going to do like downhill repeats, or rather like specific days where you're like, you're holding back on the downhills, and other days where like, I'm just going to like let it fly and just try to really bomb downhills? Yeah.
So I will definitely focus on downhill specifically. Yeah. On certain days, usually once a week is about as much as I can handle, because it is a bit harder on the legs for sure. Just that pounding. And I would say if it's something that's new for you, I would recommend maybe taking a 2-week break between, maybe just do it every 2 weeks to begin with, because it can be pretty tough to really go fast on the downhills. But yeah, I find if you can do 10 to 20 minutes of fast downhill, that can make a huge difference, both in your just downhill confidence, your technique, but also building that leg strength. So yeah, that is something I do.
I love that, because I love running downhill fast. I'm trying to get back to that myself, man. I used to love passing people, especially in the Alps. I used to always love it, because I used to always say, I was like, oh man, those guys can climb, but man, they can't run downhill. I used to love that. But so as far as downhill goes, I see a lot of people that are very like timid on running technical downhills. And it's funny because people call like Georgia Death Race technical. And for me, I don't think it's technical at all. It's not buffed out by any means, but for most of it, but it is definitely not super technical. So I guess, what tips do you have maybe for people running downhill, like, the average, middle, or back of the pack? Or how do you think that they can get faster on downhills?
For sure. So I think probably the first thing people should do to get faster on downhills is actually practice downhills. A lot of people are just inclined to focus on the uphills because the uphills are harder. And yeah, that's true. You're definitely going to have a much higher heart rate climbing. But on the downhills, it doesn't really matter where you're gaining time. If you're gaining time going uphill, going downhill, it's all the same. So yeah, that'd probably be the first thing, is just take some time, like once a week or maybe every 2 weeks, to start and just focus on running fast on the downhill and just start to develop your technique. But things you can do more specifically, if you're on a steep grade or if it's more technical, just focus on having quick feet, taking shorter steps that are quick. That can help keep you a bit more under control and just feel more stable. The other thing would be, if you do have a downhill where you can open it up a little bit more, trying to look farther ahead, so you're planning a little bit farther ahead. You can kind of get yourself in the right positions to hold your speed around turns and things like that. So that would be some initial tips.
Absolutely. I love that. That's great. That's great advice. The other thing I notice anytime I've seen you running GDR is, a lot of people break the course down, and I think they only train for like the first 30 something miles, which is like the majority of the elevation. And I think people forget in training they're like, you need to go out and have like a 6 mile or 8 mile or more where you're actually running everything, not on steep stuff, but on like rolling hills and flat. And I think I watch all these people blow their legs out completely in the first 35 or so miles. And then they hit the runnable section of the gravel roads, and then they're still going like a 17-minute mile or 16-minute mile when you should be hopefully running, even if you're mixing and walking, doing like a 11-minute mile or faster, how do you train for that transition of all this, going up and down and then hitting this? Because anytime I've seen you run, it's crazy. All of a sudden you hit the gravel road and you're running 6-minute miles. And I'm like, what is going on? This is crazy.
Yeah, I think it's important that's what's cool about that course, because you have a pretty big variety of terrain. Obviously, the Duncan Ridge is very tough, but then you hit some of those gravel roads in the middle, and it's very runnable. So I think that's what I like a lot about the death race, is you have a big variety of terrain. So I guess, again, maybe it just plays to my advantage because we do have that locally. We have the steep trails that got those really steep pitches, and then also a lot of logging roads that are a bit more runnable. So, yeah, I guess for me, I don't really change up my routine too much. I think the terrain just kind of fits naturally into what I like to run. But I would say it is important. Yeah, everybody gets kind of psyched out about how much climbing there is and how tough the death race is, and it is tough. But then you get to that middle section, even most of the second half of the race, you have pretty runnable terrain. So you do have to be patient in the first half so you can take advantage of that, because you can pick up a lot of time if you can run that stuff.
Absolutely. And I've seen people they'll come off and, I don't know, call it 70th place to the gravel roads at Long Creek. And then all of a sudden, they'll blow up, or they're then climbing up into the top 20, and it was amazing because they're running, they pace correctly. And I think that's a really good lesson to learn is, it's, all the people around you at any race, really, like, you have no idea what their fitness level is. And I always just assume whoever I'm running with around me is going to blow up. And so I should run my own. It reminds me, just to run my own race, not like, and sometimes they don't. And maybe like they leave me or I leave them, whatever it might be. But it's just kind of like, hey man, run your own race. Like is what I always think. And that's going to segue me into asking you, most of the Georgia death races you run, you've led from start to finish probably about 2-3 miles in. So you're kind of you're running alone. What is that like?
Yeah. So for me, I'm probably more comfortable running alone, honestly. I just do a lot of my training alone. So I kind of like it when it spreads out a little bit. Whether I'm in first or not in first, that's not as important. I just like being out there alone, but you're really not alone. You got all those aid stations, and especially like by the third time I was there, you kind of know people at the aid stations. They know who I am. So it's like you're running into your friends every few miles. It's nice. But right. Yeah, I'm comfortable just getting out and being alone. I got no problem with that.
What do you think is the hardest part about the Georgia death race? Like, and I'm not saying like what's the hardest climb per se, but like what for you is always the most difficult section?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, yeah, that's tough. I would say maybe leaving Jake Bull, that first 2 or 3 miles leaving Jake Bull, because you're going in, you got that like long gradual climb. It's probably 5 or 6 miles. It's pretty steady, but you have 2 or 3 miles out of Jake Bull that's pretty gentle. So I always feel like you have to run pretty fast on that section so you're not losing time. It's definitely runnable terrain. Once you hit the hill, it's okay if you're going a little bit slower just because it's uphill. And I figure at that point, if you're running that climb, you're probably gaining time on most people. But I've always found getting to that climb has been tough because I think you're also far enough from the finish. It doesn't feel like you're quite getting close yet, but you're far enough into the race, you're definitely feeling it. So that's always been a tough section for me.
So I have to know, okay, you're running up Nimblewell, which is that climb. Are you running 100% of that, or are you hiking any of that? So both times we climbed that, I run it all, That's awesome. So it is possible, people, if you're listening.
Yeah, well, I guess you have to, I think it comes back to what you're saying about pacing yourself and like being aware the second half is more runnable. Because I would say if that climb was the first climb of the race, I would say most people would run it.
Right.
Because it's not too steep. What's tough is that you've got probably 55 miles on your legs at that point, at least 50.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's what makes it tough, because it's just that it's tough too, because it's just pretty constant grade, and it's a decent grade. So yeah, it's really easy to walk, but then again, I don't know. If you can keep running though, you can pick up a bit of time. So that's always been my goal, is to just try to run it all.
That grade, I love running that. Like I call it douche grade. Like I heard that one time. Yeah. And I like that. But I train to run that. Like I'll get on a treadmill and put it at like 7%. And I love keeping a full stride. Like it feels really good. Uh-huh. So I love running races that have that. But I feel like that's another thing that people don't do. Like when I stopped running ultras for a while, because I would find myself getting to like a small hill and like a 4-mile group run on the road, and I'd be like power walking it. And I was why am I doing this? I guess, that's another thing is I think it's really important is to be able, and not that, middle back of the pack folks like should be, hey, I'm going to run up Nimblewell, because that's probably going to jack your heart rate up. You still got like a decent way to go, but if you can at least mix shuffling in there, I always feel like you're going to go twice as fast.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I do like that 7% grade. Yeah, I like running up hills. Is kind of what it comes down to. I definitely power hike at times for sure. It's definitely a skill you need to have. But yeah, I like to be able to run up the hills. That's just always fun for me, because there's a challenge. Can you keep running? And I think that's in some ways motivating for me. But yeah, there's definitely sections on that Nimblewell climb that are a little bit leveler. And even if you can just run for a couple hundred yards, you do that 3 or 4 times, you're saving yourself 2 or 3, 4 minutes. And that all just starts to add up. So yeah, if you can shuffle just for a little bit there, that's good, because there are sections that are almost flat.
Yeah, no, there are, especially like middle and kind of like towards the top of it. I feel like it levels out a lot. The other thing I want to ask you was, okay, so obviously you have your crew, which is usually your family, which is awesome. Yeah. What is your like go-to? Like, what do they give you? Like, what it's like, oh, Andrew, here you go. And you're like, oh, I've just been waiting for this. Is it like a drink, or is it food, or what?
Oh, I think the special charm of my crew is just who they are. I usually just take water and gels. It's not that I'm particularly looking forward to them, but they work for me. So that's what I stick with. But no, I think the biggest thing of having my crew out there is just knowing it's my parents. My brothers come to a couple of them, I believe. So yeah, just seeing them out there just boosts me so much. I mean, it's awesome to see your family out there. So
stop, you're hitting me in the feels over here, man. That's awesome. Yeah. And so the other thing I wanted to talk about for anybody watching this right now is that Andrew is a coach. So you can actually hire Andrew as a coach. You can hire from the death race, any other races. Talk to us about this. I want to hear more about your coaching, man.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a big reason I wanted to get into coaching is that, yes, I have had a bit of success running for sure, but I did, after Western States, I did win the race. I definitely felt a lot of pressure to just compete at high-profile races. And for me, that definitely took a little bit of the fun out of it for a while there. And I think having seen things go really well, but also see things go wrong, that's what prompted me to get into coaching, is just to try to help people first be successful, but do it in just a healthy, sustainable, fun manner. And I think I got away from that a little bit there. So that wasn't that fun, so I just kind of want other people to avoid that.
I see that so often, man. I think that's great that you're doing that, and I'm sorry that happened. It's kind of like people start doing really well at running, and then it's like everyone's like, well, you got to run this, and you need to run that. And, I feel like there's probably some pressure from sponsors and people, come run my race, come do this, or we want to see. And it's like, well, what about Andrew's wants and feelings?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I think a lot of it was just, there's definitely that external pressure, just the need to please other people. But yeah, a lot of it's just, you just have to be able to focus on yourself, prioritize what's important to you. And that was something I wasn't ready for that, because I'd never really had to do that before. because a lot of the races I'd run were there just weren't big races. Nobody really knew I was running them. So that was cool with me. But yeah, it was just very, very different for me. And it definitely took me a little while to figure out how to deal with that, because it is another component of running that I never had to deal with before. But yeah, I think no one meant anything harmful for me. Everyone just wanted to see the best for me. But yeah, sometimes those expectations just come off their own way.
Did you ever, and that's another thing, that's a great thing I want to ask is, did you ever feel pressure like to do well at GDR, or were you showing up more like, man, this is going to be awesome, or were you like, oh my God, I have to win this? Or
no, so I think that was, yeah, GDR is very interesting in that sense, because while it is a higher profile race for sure, definitely 2 times I went there to try to get a golden ticket. Obviously, I'm in it for the competition from that point. But I think what kind of kept GDR as a race, that I didn't feel pressure around that one at all, just because I like the course so much. I like the race itself so much, the community around the race. I was there for myself as well. I wanted to go to that race because I like the race. That's why I was there. Yeah, it was a golden ticket race. Yeah, there was definitely some, like, I'd like to get a golden ticket, but for me, the primary reason I was there is because I like that race. So that race was about me, and it was convenient that it was another race that people would like to see me do, I guess. But, that one was always for me. I like that race a lot.
Right on. Well, it's interesting. I always find like the least amount of pressure when I go to a race where I don't know many people at. Like, so when I'm not running locally in the Southeast, or like if I go to Oregon and run like Gorge Waterfalls, like, cool, I don't really know anybody or many people out here. And so it's like, cool, there's no pressure. I always felt like I did better with that. And I'll segue that into talking about, the average non-elite runner, non-Andrew Miller runner who's doing GDR, is like, we place all this pressure on ourselves, right? But like at the end of the day, like, why do we do this stuff? It's like, we want a challenge. We want it to be fun. It's like, just accept that, like, whether you finish or not, like, at the end of the day, nobody really cares other than you. So just do the best you can, and if it doesn't work, maybe consider hiring Andrew or a coach, or, come back. You got the spike you got to carry with you if you don't finish. So, yeah, I'll never forget. I used to go to a guy to get our awards made for like the overall male-female GDR winner up in like this really backwoods area in North Carolina. And the guy had like deer racks that that hadn't been picked up by the people that dropped them off. And I would go and buy them, and we would mount them on an award. And I remember we gave this big deer rack thing, and it's like, this guy's got to get it on a plane. There's no way he's going to be able to take this back with him. So then we started doing like smaller. I was like, all right, now I had to change the awards we were doing because you kept winning. I was like, he's got to get on a plane.
Oh, thanks for thinking of me there. Yeah.
But anyways, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. How can people hire you and find you for coaching?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way is to just go to my website, andrewmillercoaching.com. And yeah, just send me a message, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you. If you just want to set up a phone call too, I'm totally happy to just get on the phone, talk free of charge, talk about coaching, what we could potentially do together, that kind of thing. I'm totally open for whatever you want. So yeah, please reach out. I'd be happy to work with you.
Heck yeah. I'm going to call you and just ask for life advice.
I can do that too.
Well, man, you're a hero. I love your family. Love like what you do, man. It's awesome. I hope to see you soon. Whether it's at GDR or not, doesn't matter, man. You're awesome. Keep it up, dude. And just keep running and staying happy, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean.
All right. Thanks for being on, buddy. All right, our next guest is Paul Reynolds from New York. He has finished Georgia Death Race 4 times. He has 4 spikes and is going for his 5th. And on any one of my ultra marathons that we have, like let's say GDR or Sky to Summit 50K or whatever it might be, if you finish something 5 times, you get an embroidered jacket with the race logo, your name on it, and under it, 5-time finisher. And this is a very, very coveted jacket for GDR. There's, I think, maybe 7 or 8 people that have it. I think it's less than 10. So Paul is aiming to join the club. Paul, thanks for coming on, and thanks for running 4 times.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Sweet. So I wanted to have you on, one, because obviously you've done this 4 times. You're going for your 5th finish. And I wanted to kind of dive into, some tips and tricks and what you learned from this race specifically. Like, maybe let's go back to like your first time doing GR, like what drew you to it and what was your like experience? Like, did you screw up the first time? Like, was it crazy? Like tell me about that.
My first time doing it, a friend of mine that was back when they had the lottery system back then. He heard about it before I did. So we both put in. I'm just lucky. He's not lucky. I got in. So I went. That was actually my first big ultra marathon. Like, I flew down there by myself. Didn't really do a lot of research on the course. Might have watched a YouTube video or 2. But I realized that the South has some mountains in it. I didn't think there was going to be mountains like that down there. So, it was kind of like a eye-opening little adventure. But it's just the whole course. It's just such a nice, beautiful course. The hard parts are hard for a reason, and the highs are better than the lows, I guess you could say.
The juice is worth the squeeze, as I say.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
Yeah. So in New York, where are you in New York for the people?
Like southern, like tri-state area, not too far from Beacon. I believe you did the Breakneck marathon. Yeah, I'm a half an hour from there. I run there all the time,
So for people just listening on a separate side note, being from the South, all I know about New York is New York City. And then you hear upstate, and it's again, okay, I get it. There's more than New York State than New York City. Absolutely. Duh. Okay. I've been to New York City twice. Did not like it. The third time I went, I actually liked it. And I went and ran a race called Breakneck. Highly recommend. But it was along the Hudson River. Oh my God, that area is so beautiful. Y'all's trails are amazing. They're so rocky and technical and just gnarly. Oh man. I mean, that's, GDR, I don't think is technical. Some people call it technical. I don't think it's buffed out. But if you're 30 minutes from there, is that where you do the most of your training is just up and down?
It's all power hike, everything, bomb downhill, kind of run when you can, crawl when you have to, kind of thing.
Right. Do you ever run at, Bear Mountain, on the other side?
Yep. We run a lot in Harriman Park. A lot of those. I mean, I'm half an hour from the Catskills, which are crazy, beautiful mountains. I'm a half an hour from Breakneck.
That's awesome.
The Hudson Highlands, they call it. Yeah, there's so many great places to run around here.
So when you're training for Georgia Death Race, so after you did the first time, you're the second, third, 4 times, what did you change about your training? Were you I need to do more vert. I need to run more rolling hills. I need to get more mileage,
Honestly, I don't do a whole lot of training because I don't have a lot of time. I get stuck at work quite a bit. So I kind of, it might be 5 miles after work, a couple nights a week. And that's all kind of rolling terrain. But on the weekends, I do try to get out and do a 20 to 30 mile per day kind of long run if I can. And for me, I think I pretty much have my climbing legs are what they are. I power hike all the hills. I might be able to run them or jog them, but I have such a fast power hike. It doesn't make sense to me. But what I work on now is mostly trying to do more sustained running. and I've done your Wild Florida a couple years ago, and I've done the Forgotten Florida twice, and those races, they beat me up because I am not used to running.
Because you have to run.
Yeah.
Right.
So like I try to do more running because GDR, when you can run, especially to that first 1 or 2 aid stations, you got to run. Like that first aid station, like that's a close one. Like you may think that you're a great runner and you have plenty of time, but you'll be surprised when you hit that first aid station and how close you are to that first cutoff. But it's not going to get any easier from there. No. If you can't make that first one, there's a reason why you have such a strict cutoff, because it's only going to get worse from there.
Right. And, that's a great point. And it's something we talked about with Andrew Miller, and we were talking about, and this is what I see, and what do I know? I don't know anything, but I watch people's training, and I think a lot of people train for GDR for the first third of it, or the first half of it, if you will, which is all of the straight up, straight down. It's all the climbing, power hiking, whatever, and I don't think enough people do what you're talking about, sustained, like nonstop running. One of my pet peeves that I hate about, that's a strong word, that I just do not like about the group road runs that I do. I love the group road runs. Okay. I love the group, love those people, is we end up here in Atlanta, we end up stopping at lights all the time. Right. And then people pause their watch, and I'm just and I get it. You want to see what pace you're running when you're actually moving, but it gets you used to just taking breaks. And when I was only ultra running, I found myself on 4-mile easy runs that I would be walking up these and it's I couldn't run up it. So it's again, I go back to this all the time. You still, even though you're doing all this up and down, all this vert and descent, you still need to be able to go out on a 7, 8, 9, 10 mile run and run it. Unless it's like this, but a rolling hills, and it's you still need that. Yeah. And like you said, because you never know how close you're going to be, depending on the person, how close you're going to be to a cutoff. It's I might have to pick it up real quick and kind of get it in there. Now, hopefully, the way we've designed the cutoffs is if you're fighting one cutoff, it doesn't really ease up too much. It's kind of you've got to be on it, So if you're fighting the cutoffs, it can be a hard day. I'll just say that. So once you did this twice, you got to be were you kind of oh man, I want to get the jacket, or at what point were you I just got to do this?
The first time I did it by myself. Second time, a buddy of mine, he kind of heard me talking about it. So I ran it with him and just stayed with him the whole time. The third year, I think I might have ran that with somebody also, but the COVID year, which was awful, a friend of mine that he DNF'd, we both DNF'd. He DNF'd on the way out. I DNF'd at Skeena on the way back. I came in, I just didn't feel like running anymore. It was like Forrest Gump. I just felt like stopping.
Just stopping.
And everybody was like, you look so good. And I was like, you know what? I've had enough for one day. If I finish, any of these races or runs that I do, great. If not, I had fun. I met all kinds of great people. That's the reason why I do it. If I get a finish, great. If I finish, set a PR for whatever distance it is, great. If not, I had fun. This is what I enjoy doing. But yeah, now it's a jacket, but I guess so many people are is that the only reason why you do it? It's no, it's a bonus, but am I going to stop at 5? Probably not.
That was going to be my question. Are you going to be the first 10-time finisher? Because everyone else has stopped at 5, I think.
No, I'll just, if I can get in, I'm going to keep going every year because I like the course. I like the whole area.
That's awesome.
One of the, what I always remember about that race is the first year I did it, coming down back into Amicalola. And I knew at this point, I was going to finish. The moon was out. The waterfall was going pretty good, because going across the bridge before you hit the steep steps, you could feel the mist coming off the waterfall, the moon. And at that point, I knew I had it. So I will always remember the moon out, the mist hit my face. It was awesome. It's just so
Which
cool.
is literally just I think it's like maybe a mile and a quarter to go. So it's like you didn't know you had it until you're 3/4 of the way up the very last climb, and that was it.
Yeah, because you never know. Because coming down back into the park, it's pretty steep. So
it's technical too.
Yeah. Once you hit the top of the waterfall, I had enough time. I could crawl my way to the finish line. So that is when I knew, all right, I got this.
Let's talk about that for a second. And I want to go back to the COVID year to explain that to people, and how terrible that was, and just ridiculous on top of things. But so when the final, GDR, the last, I think it's 3.25 miles, maybe. You basically go 1,000 feet down, 1,000 feet up, 1,000 feet down. You basically zigzag from the top of this waterfall down, which is Georgia's tallest, I think technically is the tallest waterfall. And then you go to the top, up the stairs basically, which is just brutal. It really is just brutal, because it's just so, you're having to fully pick up each footstep, and it's just your quads are, and then you just bomb way down. Anyways, so what I always find it's funny is because you get within maybe 100 yards, 50 yards probably of the finish line.
You can hear it. You can hear it and see it. You can taste it. It's right there.
And if you're not first place or something like that, you're middle of the pack, you're seeing other people, their finish being celebrated. They're finishing when you're shit, I still have 2 miles to go, and I got 1,000 feet of climbing up these damn stairs. So it's kind of just a mental, it just kind of messes with you. But we kind of start okay, that person came over there at this time, they passed by the finish line, and how long is it taking people? By the end of it, for people to go 2 miles, it's taking an hour, almost 2 hours to go that, so it's the real deal. And it's only, again, I say only, it's only 1,000 feet up, 1,000 feet down, which, on fresh legs, it's maybe 45 minutes, an hour, but people are going 2+ hours on that, and are just, shells of humans at that point. It's just, I kind of chuckle at it, because it's just what a terrible thing. There it is. And every year there's somebody that isn't familiar with the course, and they go, oh, this is it. And then they're like, wait, there's a sign telling me to go up. What is this? So let's talk about COVID edition. So for people that don't know, first of all, over the years, GDR course has more or less been from Vogel State Park to Amicalola Falls. Okay. We've had some weird stuff. One year they made me run the opposite direction from Amicalola to Vogel, and we had to basically run all 4 service roads until we hit the Benton Mackay. So it was very odd. That was weird. Those are the early days. And then COVID, the state parks didn't want us to have an event in it because all the people, whatever, no judgment here. And then, so we had to move to our start line this year, which is Reese Farm, Byron Herbert Reese Farms. But we ran a trail that connects through Vogel. So we were able to run through Vogel. We just couldn't start there. And so we ended up doing an out and back, which was terrible. You basically did the first 35, 36 miles, which is the hardest section of the entire course, as an out and back. It's basically that's what Cruel Jewel to me is. It was a very, very tough race, well put on. But they just basically do the hardest part of the Duncan Ridge Trail, as an out and back.
On Relentless. You never got a break.
Never got a break. It's just constant climbing and very steep climbing.
Oh yeah.
So anyways, yeah. And there was, the finish rate, I think that year was 40%. People were don't ever do this again. Don't ever do this again. I was yeah, I hear you. We won't do that. So, I wasn't going to say, so what kind of tips would you give to first-time runners or even people who've run it before for maybe pacing this, and kind of some maybe just GDR-specific training tips or race day tips?
Well, if you're not ready to go prepared by now, nothing's going to happen in the next week. But stair climber, if you don't have mountains or hills to climb, get on that stair climber or treadmill, put it as steep as it goes, and just grind. Some of that you've said in your the pre-race video, like don't stay at aid stations too long. For the longest time I would try to eat all my calories at the aid station, like solid food wise. So what I would do is get a little like zip top bag, throw some food in it if you want solid food. Whatever water you have in your bottles, drink it by the time you get into the aid station. Because I'm one to not drink enough, so I'm always playing catch up with with my hydration. Like last year for me was probably the best I ever felt because it was well,
pretty cool.
I thought it was cool. Some people thought it was freezing. I thought it was great.
Right.
But I don't drink when I'm when it's a cooler race like that. So I'm always behind. So drink even though you're not thirsty. Eat even if you're not hungry, kind of thing. Typical ultra running stuff. But first move with a purpose. Even if you're not running, move with a purpose for those first couple aid stations. They will start to slack off. But my big thing is when coming up into winding stair, like if you can jog that.
Yep.
Because it's not that far when you pop out of the woods onto the forest road to get up to the aid station. You can jog it. If you can, going up Nimblewell, which is terrible, that's a mountain with no top to it. I swore they were taking ground from the bottom of the mountain and putting it on top because it was like no end. And let me tell you, the one year you had signs put out that said you're almost there. And there was a couple guys that I was running with, and they were like, the aid station is like, this is not the aid station. And he's like, because he had everything downloaded on his watch or whatever. And so I'm like, well, I don't know. So it would be like a half a mile until you're there, quarter mile until you're there. Then there's a sign that says you are here. You still have like 2 miles to go to the aid station. That was one of those. These guys were so devastated. I thought it was funny. Like, it's great. It's so cool. You'll go over this race day. Follow the markers, your flags. So many people, like the one year they think they were building a new trail. Well, everybody went the new trail. And I over the years, I've actually ran after some people, yelled to them, like, you're going the wrong way. They're like, no, this is the way. Believe me, I've done this enough. I could probably do it without flagging at this point. Follow the arrows. Follow the flagging. Even if it doesn't look like the more traveled path, that's the way you're going. Follow the markers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes for all my races. Like, we put a lot of flags and signs and stuff out there. And I always say, if you get lost, you got other things to worry about. I think it's really easy just to kind of, zone out or just follow the person in front of you. And I always say that's the first thing I say is if you're letting someone else navigate for you, you're going to get lost.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you're in the back of the pack, getting lost could mean that's your day. You're not going to finish, Yep. So,
the race is hard enough. Don't add any more miles to it.
Exactly. I think it's once you get to I mean, Duncan Ridge, there's only maybe a couple places here and there you can get off, but you know, for the rest of it, really, it's just like follow all the flags, and then, you know, it's fairly straightforward, I would say.
I mean, the first year I second guessed myself quite a bit after Jake Bull come popping out onto the paved road.
The road, yeah.
I kept second guessing myself because, you know, there's no other where to go. So, but being, you know, me being my first time there, I'm like, I don't see anybody. I didn't see any markers, but it's just, you're not going to lie to us. Follow.
Right.
If there's no other where to go, there's going to be no marker there. So I kept.
That's right. Well, and I tell people, if there's a turn, it is going to look like Flag Day out there. Like I'm going to have somebody waving you down or something, blinking light, you know, whatever. It's funny. The easiest directions on that is like after you leave Jake Bull, you'll eventually run, you know, some trails, some dirt roads, and eventually you will hit a paved road. Take a right on that and just go straight for 3 miles or whatever it is until it turns to dirt. Then keep going straight until you get all the way to the top of Nimble Gap and then go left to the aid station. Like that's it. Just take a right on the paved road and just go straight.
Yeah, forever.
Forever. Yeah. And it's funny because that's the flattest and most runnable section of the entire course. Like the guys up front are running 6 minute miles.
If that was in the first 50K, most people could probably jog up it. But at that point, you, like for me, that I walked that entire thing, but I can walk a 14 minute mile. I just have just that power hike. So by the time I get to the top, once I hit that aid station, I can pretty much jog it in to the finish line from there.
Well, and that's another thing too. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, you hit on this before, is having a fast power hike. You know, some people are walking at a 25-minute mile. You just can't do that. So like and again, it's too late. You know, what are you going to do now? You know, but I always say practice your mall walking, right? So go out once, twice a week. You need to get where you can walk on flat, like a 15-minute mile, 16-minute mile tops, and just be able to do that. The more you do that, because how often most ultra runners train for running or run hiking, but how often do you just flat or easy rolling hills, whatever, just burning like hell, but just walking? You know, I think that really helps. So, dude, thank you for coming on. Do you have any last minute things you want to say before we let you go?
No, just thank you for putting on a great race. All your races are fantastic. At this point, I think all my ultra marathons are all run bum races. So I mean,
dude, that means a lot, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, get that jacket, baby.
I will.
Yeah. Well, cool, Paul. I appreciate it. Much love, man. And I will see you Friday then at the Packet Pickup.
Yeah, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
So next person up to the Bend Don't Break running podcast, I want to welcome my good buddy, Kevin Sylvie from South Carolina. Little history about him. He helps me do a bunch of trail work. He helps out at some of our races. He runs a bunch of our races. He's done Quest. He's done Sky to Summit. I think he's helped out a bunch at Grayson, at the Scales aid station, and not to mention, more importantly, what we want to talk to him about today is he's started GDR twice, hasn't made it to the finish both those times, unfortunately, and he's attempting it now for the third time. So, buddy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And we'll get into this later, but he actually is going to have a special treat for everybody who's running GDR at the start of this. But we'll talk about that last. So let's just get into this real quick. So you've got a coach for this year. What were your previous experiences with GDR, and what do you think led to you not making it to the finish?
Lack of redundance. Not having a extra pair of shoes in my drop bag, for example, having a broken Mafate, a broken shoe that resulted in a swelled up ball of my foot that made me quit, mainly because of the pain, and then not knowing how to deal with this giant blister and a broken shoe. So you can't fix broken shit. If you don't know how to problem solve, you stop. So you have to be able to fix something or problem solve or have redundance so that when your bladder breaks, you have another one. When your psychological meltdown is because of a problem that you could have just changed shoes, you would have kept going. So it's a breakdown coming. You don't know it's like a car that's going to break down on a trip. You just don't know what's going to break, and can you fix it and keep going?
It's funny because I've actually seen in our races, even at GDR, like people will have like the bladder in their pack, like some part of that will like all of a sudden break off or whatever happens, and they're spilling water everywhere. And it's like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. What do I do? And I think that's like a lot of not only Georgia Death Race, but just ultra marathons in general is like, hey, I've planned for A, B, and C, and all of a sudden X just happened. Like, what do I do? Okay. So the year that you had a shoe malfunction, what did you do? Like, what happened exactly? And then what did you do about it?
I didn't know what was wrong with my foot or my shoe for any period of time until a few weeks later. Like, I took the sole of my shoe out and it came in half, and I reached in and grabbed the other half, and I was like, oh my gosh. I took my camera even on my phone and shot it down inside, and I'm like, it's broken from the inside. It was a vice, like pinching like a pair of pliers, pinching the ball of my foot over and over and over. So I just had this psychological thing thinking I have something wrong with my foot. My foot hurts. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea it was the shoe. I've never experienced that. So I would say now, like, okay, I'm going to have an extra pair of shoes, and I'm not going to wear that brand again or that, so I'm doing some things different. The shoes that I'm wearing have been tested. That's one thing I think is nice. I believe that your gear you sort of need to know what your gear is going to do, because shit'll surprise you. Right.
And then, so how far did you make it both those years?
Well, I did a solo GDR during COVID, like just sort of tried it to see how it goes and to see if I could stay on time by myself with no help. And I made it at like 29 miles and then had to cut myself. It was a hot day. I started late. It was kind of crazy. It was not a good thing. And then I ran too fast, etc. I ran too fast, and then I couldn't make the cutoff because I ran too fast. It makes no sense, but that's where the dynamics come in. But 29, and then later that year we had the altered version. That's when the shoe broke. And then, of course, the next year, if you want me to jump to that one, was the hot year, and it was super hot, and I wasn't prepared for the heat. I wasn't prepared for the hydration and electrolyte loss, and I watched, elite runners cramped up and in a ball in the back of a pickup truck going to Winding Stair, like crying, literally, like elite runners, like hypothermia and tears. Like, I was like, wow, that's why they call it the death race. Like, holy smokes. These are people I look up to, and they're freaking broken, like completely broken. So there's a lot that can go right and there's a lot that can go wrong. And I think it's about how long can you do this and stay on time? So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you bring up about it getting hot. So it's funny because I think in the grand scheme of things, like if this was like June or July or August, you'd be like, oh my gosh, and we're like, hey, it's going to get like up to 65 degrees. You'd be like, that's not hot, right? But it's because you're coming off of winter and most people have been doing the majority of their training in, 30, 40, maybe 50 degree weather. Right. Especially this year, all of a sudden it started getting warm. We were getting used to it. Boom. Now we're like 2 weeks of cold weather. Yeah. And it gets very humid too. And then I think a lot of it too is the steepness, like the grades of the Duncan Ridge and the Coosa Trail for the first 38 miles, it's like 25 to 35% grades. And that jacks your heart rate up like crazy. And what does that do? That makes you very warm. And then if you couple the humidity, which it's not going to be dry heat, it's always going to be wet heat. It's going to be, almost choking you with humidity. Oh, yeah. And it's like you couple those two things together and you're not used to that. Plus you got a pack on your back and you're getting very, very warm. And I think, everyone could benefit from doing heat training. We talked about that yesterday, man. I was doing like heat training before this, and it's like, well, how do you do that? It's like, I don't know, steam room, sauna, put on a bunch of clothes, whatever it might be. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people chasing the early cutoffs are going a little harder than they normally would. And again, what is that? It's jacking your heart rate up, which ultimately is making you warmer.
2 weeks ago, I did a 50K on a Saturday and a 25K on a Sunday in the mountains, and it was really, really hot. And I'm really glad because it helped me to do that heat training. So it was sort of a strange happiness.
For sure. So what have you, and you killed that too, man. You did the Conquer the Rock 50K and 25K the next day.
Beautiful. And you smoked the 25K.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing I want to ask you, so what are you doing differently this year in training versus like your previous?
I'm so glad you asked. So it may be too late for some folks, but a good while back, I made an inner circle mentally. And it's like, if you don't have a shiny spike or if you don't have a shiny buckle, and I did think it was kind of funny when I was making notes earlier, I thought, it sounds weird. Like, I'm only going to hang around people with shiny buckles and spikes. It sounds like a creepy thing, right? So think about this, though. I only want...
Are you going to biker bars?
It sounds like a Judas Priest, hell-bent for leather, for sure. But so I really have decided, like, if I can't sleep, I'm going to scroll through Strava and look at, like, someone who's a GDR finisher's Strava. Like, that would be cool. Like, I'm spending time with the network of people that are winners, that make it, that know what it means, that care, that want also for me to feel that finisher thing. They actually understand, many of them, what that DNF feels like at GDR. So they want me to be rid of that. They want that burden gone. And so the spikes mean a lot. And I am grateful for the opportunity to get, another great chance.
Hell yeah. Well, and I'll along those lines, I'll say it's like, you have to be obsessed, right? Like, we've had this conversation, like, you can fake your way through a 50K, maybe even a 50 mile.
You can make friends at a 50K.
That's right. You can.
Yeah, time for that shit at GDR, right?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Exactly. No, you're right. And I like, because I've faked my way through a lot of 50Ks. I do couch to 50K all the time. It's not comfortable, but I know what it feels like, and I can go do that.
Yeah.
GDR that's different. You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be obsessed. You need to be in a relationship with GDR, like you were talking about. It's like, you got to tell your loved ones, your friends, like, sorry, I'm busy until GDR is over. And obviously, some people it comes easier, and other people, you got to work harder. I don't think anybody is finishing GDR not working hard, and I think that's when you get in that, because it's not quite 100 miles. And I've had all these people like, just make it 100 miles. And I said, no, it's unique. It is what it is, right? Kind of like Kevin Sylvie. He's perfect. He's unique, and
thank you.
You beautiful human, you. God.
Wow.
So
takes one to know
what
one.
else have you? Yeah. What else have you done in training? Like, have you done more hills, less hills, more speed? Like, what? Tell the people.
I don't mind plugging Natalie and just saying I got a coach to help me with some stuff that I would have not done otherwise. And I was a good student, meaning I could pass the test. I hate homework. I hate it. And so if I look at it that way, I needed someone to say, dude, you got to do your homework. And here's what it is. And on Tuesday, you must do this. And so I just had to follow a plan. I could not have done it without her instruction, because it was more like a teacher-student relationship. And I was like, I don't want to, fail her, right? I want to do the right thing, as the coach has been, doing the work of helping me see what next for so many days now. I feel like that is a bond that is an unusual thing. So you have to have a coach for this thing, for this specific event, in my opinion, so that you do the right homework. Because you can't pass a test if you didn't do your damn homework. Isn't that what we tell all of our nephews and nieces and kids and all? Like, do the homework, man. And so I became convicted that I didn't have even homework laid out, and I was going to just go do it and work hard and la, la, la. But now I know how to follow a plan. And I think that, if I trust the plan and the coaches, then it's got to work, right?
That's right. So another question for you is, like, what does this race mean to you? Like, why GDR? Why not something else? Like, why is this race so important to you?
Damn. It's designed to destroy you, but you're not going to let it do it. You're not going to do it. You're not going to let it destroy you. And so that's where I want to go. I want to go there. I know you're going to ask me about like first timers at some point, but it sort of segues right into the reality that, look, if somebody says, tell me about this race, I'm going to say, look, it is designed to destroy your central nervous system. Go for it and see what I mean. You won't believe me, but you're going to go through like a physical breakdown, and then an emotional breakdown, and then a psychological breakdown, and then a mental breakdown, and then a digestive breakdown. And you're going to say, how do I possibly take another step on an empty tank? And it's like that burden of life question, like, fill your cup up, man. Fill it up. You can fill up your own cup and then drink from it if you have to. You can dig deep. This is psychological warfare. Like, you're going to do this thing. Everyone thinks you can't, but you're going to do it anyway. That's the way I like it. That's the way I like it. That's the story we're going to play later. Later on, you can rewind it and go, damn, it sounds like he's talking about it's already happened. Well, maybe it already has, so.
Maybe it already has.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great thing you bring up is I think this course, I know this course is designed to basically strip people of like their hope, like their, when you give everything you can and you're so beaten and broken, like you just let everything go. And there's like a huge emotional release from that. And I think that it's very healthy. It's very humbling. Cause I don't care who you are. I've seen people in the top 3, like literally this one guy, I won't mention this person by name. He's awesome. Right. And this is no like chink out of his armor.
Sure.
He's human, right? We all are. I'll never forget, like, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, his first time racing it. And he was like 3rd or 4th. And he came in, I saw him at the road crossing with like 4 miles to go. So he was just entering Amicalola Falls State Park. Like, he hadn't even dropped down, come up, whatever. And he literally, I was like, hey man, how you doing? And he was like barely hobbling. He was crying. He comes over and just gives me this hug. He's like, I don't know what the hell this is, but this is freaking amazing, man. I was like, oh my God. Are you okay? He's like, I'll get it done. So I think, in that, with this race, I don't think whether you're first or last, you may have slightly time difference, but I think you're going to have a lot of that same experience. And I want that. I want you to give yourself up, right? And give up your ego during that. I think it's very, very humbling for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you for putting on the race to begin with. It's an insane amount of work. I enjoyed trail maintenance, by the way, if you don't mind me throwing that out there to say that we took all the sharp shit out of that climb in Mount Aiken. And I'm sorry, folks, you're not going to bleed up and down Aiken anymore because we cleaned it up for you, but we shouldn't have done it because you're still going to get wrecked some other way in some other place. But we sweetened the deal at Aiken. Like, you can actually soar down that now. And I want to say, a lot of RDs don't do any trail maintenance, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I'm going to say for the ones that make these unrunnable places tolerable so that you can function, it's really amazing. Like, what you did yesterday was really cool, and we had great help, and it was a fun day for everybody. But I enjoyed cleaning up that mountain. And I think when you haul equipment up a mountain, gas and a saw or whatever, you start to realize that going up it with a heavy pack is not such a big deal anymore. Yes, it's a lot longer day, obviously, but it gives you the respect for the mountain, and we worked in like smoke, like we were getting it done, even though we had like fire and everything. We had fire. Who has fire? I'm going to do trail maintenance and a fire and then go for a run. It's crazy.
Yeah, they started doing the controlled burns yesterday.
Got some cool video.
All of a sudden I go,
I was like, hey, Kevin, yelling at you. I was like, over there. He's like, what? And then we see smoke coming up. I was like, I think we need to get off the mountain. and then we get back to the car, and like all of a sudden it was like from another direction. It was like the smoke just like literally blocked out the sun, and it like turned to these crazy colors. That was cool.
We had an orange glow from the sun that you never see unless there's smoke. And then how far was that smoke on that gravel fire safety road? Like they were burning a couple of miles. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, they're burning a lot, which is good. It's definitely good. It's good for the environment, believe it or not. But that was crazy. We drove through like their burn line, so they walked the line and burned.
Yeah, this is a plug for hey, watch the video. This is really cool.
Yeah, watching it. So check this out. So real quick, I'll say this, and then I want to give you one last shout out, and then we'll go to the next guest. But when the first year we did Georgia Death Race, okay, they were doing controlled burns in the Jake Bull area, coming down Winding Stair Gap. Okay, the course is slightly different. Well, it's, I would say, much different. But really, it's on the back third of the race that it's different. Like, we didn't have single track at all from Long Creek to the finish, okay? But they had done a controlled burn, but they dropped the spark that morning of the race. And they're like, it'll be fine. We're not burning across the road. So by the time it got dark, people like in the back of the pack, there was stuff that was still smoldering and still going. And one guy, I'll never forget, he was just so freaking out of it at this point, whatever time it was, 1, 2 in the morning. He's like, dude, I saw a log. It was on fire. I thought I was Moses talking to God in the burning bush. And he was like, he told me to go finish the race. And I was like, dude.
The flame gods.
And he did.
Woo, from the fire. Voices from the fire. I like that.
But speaking about voices from the fire, we got a special treat. You, at the start of the race, are going to be singing and bellowing the Star Spangled Banner. Dude, just tell me a second about how you got into singing and what you do for your own clarity and health with singing.
Oh, wow. So people talk about tone, hey, I don't like your tone, or he had this really sweet tone. You hear these conversations back and forth about it, but tone is real. Tone is important. We can control our tone. We can fix it. Like in sales, like in a practical industry-driven way, the success that I've seen in, say, my industry, I would say to a salesman that's nervous, go in the bathroom and sing a song and then go out and talk to your client, or sing a song and then make your phone calls. Like you need that. We sing before services. People go to church every Sunday and they don't want to hear that sermon. It makes them sleep. But that song makes them listen, and it integrates their nervous system in a way that is not possible otherwise. We have vocal cords and we have a central nervous system. We have this amazing body, and we don't know how to use it. Like, some guys are sitting around playing video games. Some guys go out in the middle of the woods and chant and hum and sing. And, you can think that sounds strange, but guess what? One of them helps. One of them doesn't. And so psychologically, I think in some ways I discovered the value of singing and how it improves your vagal tone. And it's something you can believe or not, but I'm telling you, it works. And if you've ever been through some tough times, maybe you don't need a pill, maybe you need a run, and maybe you need a song. There's tons of information about all this. But so at the end of the day, I sing for me, I sing for my mental health, and I enjoy it, and I'm not going to stop. Like, it's my thing that I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to drink water, and I'm going to run, and I'm going to sing, like, for sure. But it does make me feel better, and I usually keep it to myself. Like, I had a person ask me to sing at their funeral, and that was an honor. And then now I've got this crazy opportunity, and I'm really grateful.
Was this before they passed away?
I don't mind saying my father has told me at his funeral he wants me to sing How Great Thou Art. So he wanted me to record it. I did. And he heard it and he said, I approve. It's wonderful. And I want you to do that. And I was like, wow. But I told him, I said, I want to sing it to you while you're alive. Hello? Like, this is ridiculous, right? So I did do that. I sang it for him while he was alive. And then we'll sing it once then. But now I'm thinking, shoot, Death Race. Someone's asked me to sing the Star Spangled Banner. I'm a huge patriot. You know why I got into running. We're at the, in the middle of Blood Mountain, for crying out loud. I mean, like, did I want to sing the national anthem out here? Yeah. Did I know you would want me to do it in front of the race? Then absolutely. I was probably going to sing it in the bathroom before the damn race anyway. You know that, right? Like,
well,
I was just going to go in the bathroom and sing the Star Spangled Banner all to myself. And then I'm like, hey, he wants me to do it with a mic. Nice. So thank you.
Yeah, we're going to have I'll be honest, you were my
second choice.
The second guy that I wanted to have, my second
Michael
choice.
Jackson's dead.
No, but Steve Vai did not.
Well, he was just going to play it on the guitar and freak everybody out, but he can't sing like I can.
Yeah,
honestly, Steve Vai cannot sing like I can. He's great with the guitar, but
no, he can't.
If Steve Vai had me, there's a lot of other stories, but I had to have a family and stuff like that. I was busy.
Well, dude, you're a hero. I hope you crush GDR next weekend. Dude, thanks for being my buddy, helping out with trail work and running, just being so awesome. Kevin Sylvie for president, or at least booster club president. You know
no more
mean?
Politics.
All right, up now we have Doug Lynch from Kentucky, many time over ultra runner. He is also running Georgia Death Race for his first time. I wanted to have Doug on. He reached out to us. He has a very unique story of his why. I think as we all get into ultra running, there's definitely a reason why we do that. Doug has a prolific story. I'm really excited to hear it. I hope it inspires you, or maybe you can relate to this. So Doug, you're up in Kentucky right now. You're outside in your truck because you got people at your house. It is probably 15 degrees or colder, and I'm sure you're bundled up, man. How are you doing up there?
Doing pretty good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man. So let's get to this. So I kind of creeped you a little bit on ultra sign up and just saw like a crazy slew of and list of things that you've done and accomplished, from 100 milers, 50Ks, 8 milers, everything in between. So obviously you're not new to trail and ultra running. So tell me a little history about Georgia Death Race and how you found this race and why you wanted to do it and what it means to you.
Well, my story goes back about 10 years ago, and I had a good friend that I started running with here in Kentucky. His name's Andrew Walker. You might know that guy. He owns 7,000 feet running company in Colorado. Well, he was always a big hill climber, and I was actually the opposite. I didn't like hills, and he told me that the only way you're going to get stronger is to get on the hills and fall in love with hills, and that's what I've been trying to do for the last 10 years. And I actually started my journey at Amicalola Falls back to recovery. Almost didn't make it out of those woods one day. Decided to go up to Springer Mountain and do some hiking. And I was hiking out there with pretty much half the blood of my body missing from Crohn's-related anemia. And soon after that, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease and was getting blood transfusions. And I went from a hospital bed to running 100 milers. So it's I'm just one of the lucky ones who have Crohn's and who can get out and run.
The people that don't understand what Crohn's is, as somebody, I don't know if you know this about me, and it's, thank God I don't have that, but I have, 4 years ago, I had a health scare. I thought I had stomach cancer, throat cancer. I lost all this weight. My face looked sunken in. My dad even told me after the fact, he said, I thought this was our last week with you. And I had upper GI problems, not lower GI problems like Crohn's. And, going into the gastroenterologist, the GI, I had to have an upper endoscopy, which is they put you to sleep and they put a camera down there and look around. And I'm like, freaked out. And all of a sudden it's like, you wake up and you're like, cool, they're going to tell me something. And they go, we don't know what's wrong with you. And, before I even got that procedure, I went in and that's one of the things they were talking about. I was like, oh, you might have Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and all this stuff like that. And it's, the stomach is something very interesting. I'm sure you can relate. I mean, what you're telling me, that's scary, right? So it's like, it's something that like you don't even think about until it's not working properly or until it's bothering you, man. That's awful, man. I can't do that.
Yeah, it pretty much goes through my whole body, and I've had the cameras. I've swallowed cameras and had to go all the way through my body, and drinking all kinds of stuff in hospitals, and I still get infusions once every 8 weeks to keep me in remission, so I don't bleed anymore. Running with the disease was the hardest thing I ever overcame, and that's one reason why I want to come back to this area of Georgia, because I know that's where I almost. Pretty much, it changed my life. Those mountains changed my life, and it made me so sick because I was already sick when I got there that I got help finally. And it's kind of like an anniversary for me. It's a 10-year anniversary of when all this started in my body about 2013 of spring. And here I am 10 years later coming back to run the Georgia mountains, do 74-ish miles at the Georgia Death Race. And I'm so stoked about it. And if it wasn't for all the doctors and nurses and just the support system I have, but from other runners, because I know runners who are battling cancer that go out and run days at the same day they get their radiation treatments, or not the radiation treatments, but the other treatments they get. And it's just amazing.
Chemo, yeah.
Chemo, yes, sir, chemo. And it just, my disease is treatable. And I just, I don't let nothing stop me. And I think the stomach issues that you talked on is a lot of times in those races, that's your stomach goes. A lot of times people stop and their stomachs go. I just keep going no matter what. You just keep going.
Right. So when you're doing, we call, by the way, when you go from Amicalola to Springer Mountain and back, I think it's about like 18 miles. We call that the meat grinder. So you felt bad before that, and then you went out on it. Like, did this like happen all of a sudden, or was it kind of like slowly coming on? And like when you're out there and you started feeling bad, was it like, oh, I just don't feel right, or is it like I might die? Like I need to get like 911. How dire was this?
Yeah, it's a real long story. I'm trying to keep it short for you, but I actually showed up at the parking lot above Amicalola Falls. I was on my way to visit my mom, who was living in Kennesaw, Georgia. She was in hospice care at the time, and I was starting to do different runs around that area, or hikes around that area. Mm-hmm. And I got to that parking lot, and I took off on the trail, and I probably made it maybe 50 yards. And I had been sick before that, but I done have my vacation paid for. I'm going out here, and I'm hiking up to Springer Mountain. I'm not stopping. I don't care if I'm sick. I knew something was going on. I just didn't know exactly what. Men can be hard-headed sometimes. We don't like doctors. I knew I was losing blood. I could see blood. But I decided to go for it, and I got about 50 to 100 yards, and I turned around, came back, and got in my car, sat in my car. I knew something was wrong. I felt like my heart was about ready to explode because you're missing oxygen when your hemoglobin's at 4.3. You're missing a lot of blood. And I sat there and cried, and I just sat there and prayed, God, hey, man, if you're going to take me, you're going to take me out here on these trails because I'm not stopping. And I went out there, and it took me actually, he said 18 miles. Well, it took me 2 days to get back from Springer Mountain to my truck. Luckily, there's an inn out there called Linfonte Hikes Inn.
The hike-in.
And I stayed the night there.
The Linfoot hike-in.
Yeah, if it wasn't for that, man, I don't know what would happen to me, but they gave me a room. So it took me 2 days to go 18 miles. I can go 18 miles in a few hours these days, unless I'm climbing, I guess, the first few hills at Georgia Death Race. But so I made it back.
Wow.
So I just would walk 50 miles or 50 feet at a time. And you know what it's like to be at elevation at 14,000 feet. When you're at like Pikes Peak, 14,000 feet, how you're gasping for air.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it was, trying to get my breath. And I left there and got to the hospital, and they thought it was my heart. But once they realized the guy's missing half the blood in his body, they started treating me for blood loss. And I got blood transfusions, and then I went through iron infusions for about 6 months. And I finally got the diagnosis that I needed to know what's wrong with me, because at the time I didn't know I had Crohn's. I just knew I had something going on, and finally I got the diagnosis, and then it was all about finding a way to stop it, to treat it, because nothing they were giving me would stop it. So I would still run and lose blood and end up weak again and getting sick again. And finally they gave me some drug that's called Remicade. Remicade. It's a biochemical drug that a nurse comes to my house every 8 weeks and gives me. And like I said, I feel great. I mean, I'm 54 years old.
Like IV.
I feel great now, and I'm blessed. So, when you go through something like that,
dude, that's so scary to me.
It's pretty scary. But you know what? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I feel like it's a homecoming for me coming back. And I know it's not an easy race. I don't know what's going to happen. I've never had a DNF, and I hear that's because I haven't done enough hard races. So we'll see. But I'm very excited and honored to toe the line with everybody that's going to be there, and seeing others out there hurting just like me, it just inspires me to keep going.
Dude, that's like, that to me is all crazy. So let me tie this into what to your story, and hopefully this will give you a little bit of inspiration. So our last aid station on the race, which is Nimblewell, originally it was in Nimblewell Gap itself, but it was so hard to get up to with the truck
that it just didn't make sense. So now we have it basically at the Linfoot hike-in driveway. And a mile, if even about a mile after that, you will pass the Linfoot hike-in and you will take a right on the Linfoot hike-in trail. So like that is what you take back to Amicalola Falls State Park. And with that being said, and that's interesting. So the gentleman who has gotten us access to be able to use that trail and come by there, the hike-in, is the director of the hike-in, Eric Graves, a good friend of mine. He also puts on, I think this last year, the Mountain Madness 15K, which was just yesterday, this past weekend. So he's awesome. And we got to tell him this story because I wonder if he was there when that happened. But, so hopefully that brings it all, full circle. So if you get that far, and I hope you do, you'll basically with, I guess, less than 10 miles to go, probably like 8 or 9 miles to go, you're going to pass the Linfoot hike-in, likely in the dark. Right. So it's just, I don't know, man, all that's just,
that's pretty awesome stuff.
How scary is it? Yes. How scary is it? This is what people don't understand. If you've never had like some crazy ailment, which I pray to God that I don't wish on my worst enemies. And again, listening to your story and with Crohn's and stuff, what I have is nothing compared to that, But how scary is it? Talk about that for a second. It's like when you that 6-month period where you're like sick and messed up, but like they don't know what's wrong with you. Cause it's like, once you know what's wrong, maybe you can treat it or have a plan. It's that interim where we don't when doctors are puzzled, they're like, oh, well, we'll just try a test. And it's like, oh, this test came back, maybe talk about that.
Yeah, that was probably the most frustrating 6 months of my life. Just not knowing what it was and going in, doing these tests. I mean, like you said, you've been there. You've had some stuff shoved down your throat. You've had to drink probably some pretty nasty concoctions they give you at the hospital. And to go in there weekly and have this dye put in you and go through these little tubes all in you and cameras in you and up you and still nothing. And the hard part was not having the way of stopping it and to know that you're losing blood. And one of the worst parts about this whole thing, Sean, was when you lose all your blood, the parts of your body that does not have the blood, it cramps up so bad that you do not sleep. You wake up constantly from cramping on top of your feet, top of your hands. Muscles that you didn't even know you had in your body start cramping. And it's so painful. And I would wake up for months, just hours, every couple hours, just walking with a Charlie horse, trying to get rid of a Charlie horse. And it lasted for months. And I was misdiagnosed. Just crazy. I'd go in and say, I'm not sleeping because I'm cramping all night. Where they want to send me to a sleep apnea doctor. I'm like, no, I'm bleeding. I'm losing blood in my heart. I even flunked a stress test. Sean, before I came down to Amicalola Falls, and they didn't call me back. I had to call them back. I was like, yeah, I think I might have something wrong with my heart. Because that's what they thought was wrong with my heart at first. And it wasn't my heart. I didn't have enough blood to pump my heart. That's why, but it was crazy. I was one of the ones that fell through the loophole, whatever. I was very lucky. And then I finally found a doctor who actually found what was wrong with me. And she had a brain aneurysm and died at 42 years old on me. So I was back to I had to go back and find another doctor after that. And it's just like,
my God,
stuff just kept happening to me. And it just bad luck with it. And, but you know what? I lost my mother in 2015. Guess where the last place me and her ever went to? Amicalola Falls.
Where?
Amicalola Falls.
Wow.
So we went back a year later and I took her to where I almost didn't make it out. And so it's when we get to that platform overlooking the fall or looking at the falls, I guess we climb up at the end of the race.
Correct.
That's the last place I ever stood with my mother before she passed a few months later from CPOD or she was 87
COPD.
years old. Yeah, COPD.
Wow.
And she moved from Kentucky to Georgia to Kennesaw. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would have known about all the Georgia stuff. And then Andrew Walker started talking about wanting to do the Georgia death race and asked me to crew him. Of course, he gets married, he moves out to Colorado, and he didn't make it back for that. But I think one of his employees actually won the Georgia death race last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Who is his employee?
He's from Colorado. I really don't know his name. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. He's from Salada.
Maybe it was Morgan Elliott.
That's it, Morgan Elliott from Salada, Colorado.
Yeah, I love Morgan. Morgan's a great guy. He used to live out here, like Asheville area. Yeah.
So it's kind of like full circle. Everything's just kind of come full circle with the Georgia Death Race. And a buddy of mine named Kelly Tipple, he ran your race, the Florida 120. And that's before I started doing 100-mile races. And he's a bigger guy like me. I'm about 205, 6'1". And I was a sprinter when I was younger, but never a long distance runner. And I watched him doing some live recordings during the Florida 120. And it just got me like, hey, man, I can do this too. I want to try it. And so he did it. And so I'm doing the same stuff now. It's awesome.
So that's great. Man, that's so cool. I mean, what a full circle story. I'm sorry for obviously the loss of your mother and you know what you're going through. And I mean, you know, we can sit here and talk about Crohn's, and people are like, you know, I think a lot of people have heard about it, but they don't really know what it is. So that's kind of interesting. Hold on one second. I've got to turn this off. Sorry, Scott can go back and my stove was going off. But I think it's very interesting. Like, you know, I implore people is go check out like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis and all stuff like that. And, you know, just be very thankful that, you know, that you don't have that. Is there anything specifically like when you're going to be running Georgia Death Race or any other race that you have to do differently than other people? Like, do you have a certain diet you have to abide to? Do you have to pace a certain way? Can you not like let your heart rate get over a certain amount? Like, I don't really know much about that.
I'm one of the lucky ones, Sean. I try to plan my my infusions about a week or two out, which I had my infusion last week, just so I've got the medicine in my body. It's not a steroid. It doesn't give me any extra crazy abilities to do this race. It just keeps me normal. And that's all I want to be is normal. I don't want to, you know, I'm coming into this race. Nobody knows what I'm doing at the start line. And just like the guys next to me or ladies next to me, I don't know their stories. We don't know who's running there with cancer or what their story is. And as far as food, and I love real food. I cook that bacon for me. I love crispy bacon. I'm going to eat and drink Fireball, whatever you got. I've trained my body for 10 years for this race. I don't know if I'm trying to, you know, I try to get elevation more than I do mileage. I had like 250,000 feet of climbing last year, but I'm coming from Kentucky, I think that's pretty good because we're only at 500 feet here where I'm at, above sea level. And I get 2,000 miles a year plus about 250,000 feet of elevation gain. So I'm trying to simulate what I'm going to have. You can't simulate the Georgia Death Race from what I've saw through videos or what I've been told from other runners. But I've done some trips out west with some guys and done some 14,000. I did the Pikes Peak last year for training for this. And when I got up to that 14,000 foot elevation, it felt like I was having a relapse of my Crohn's. It scared me so bad because it felt just like I did when I was experiencing the Crohn's at the Amicalola Falls. I couldn't breathe. And it's like, you know, it's just scary, but I kept moving forward. We got it done. But,
man,
but it's just a disease. It's like diabetes. I also have diabetes. I take insulin once a day in the morning. You know, I mean, I've got a few autoimmune diseases, but it's not going to stop me. You know, it's just like, you know, I learned when I was younger, quitting. If you learn to quit, just like the saying goes, if you learn to quit, you'll keep quitting, you know? So I try not to quit. Just keep moving. I'm going to puke. I might puke. Who knows out there? Let's have fun. I'm so stoked.
You're an
about
inspiration. I love it, man. This is crazy. You have every reason to not do this, to stop, to not put this stress on your body and, you know, be uncomfortable, which I'm sure you get very uncomfortable, more so than the average person. Yet here you are. So, dude,
I disagree. I
love
disagree.
that.
I disagree.
Really?
I think I have an advantage to all the people who don't have what I have because I've learned to suffer in hospitals. And
Fair.
I was like, if I get out of here, I'm going to live, man. And that's what we're doing. When you get up there and you're 30 miles in, 40 miles in, and you're suffering, you're living. Not everybody gets a chance to do that. We're living. Just like when you go jump out of an airplane, when you jump out of an airplane, you're living. You know, or when you're flying an airplane, you're living. So anyway, I got that second chance, and I'm taking full advantage of it. Full advantage of it. They call me the Phoenix. That's my trail name, the Phoenix.
You know, the Phoenix. Oh, I like it. Rising from the ashes.
Yes, sir.
You know, in a messed up way, I think it's almost sad because, you know, that I cannot relate to your experience at all. And like, it's like, whoa, holy gosh, you know, but you know, the few times I got really injured or, you know, when I have my stomach problems, like, you know, when you get injured, it's like, oh, I can't run. Well, I'm coming off an injury right now. It makes me appreciate every step, right? When I figured out my health problems and I got to the point where I could feel comfortable in my own skin again, it was like I wasn't thankful for every run. I was thankful for every second, you know? And I think most people don't get that opportunity to, like, quote a country song I like. It's like, you know, to live like they're dying, you know? So it's like when you have brushes with death, you know, or seemingly to yourself, it's like you really appreciate and you drink life more, you know, unlike somebody who hasn't, you know, it's just different. So I hear that, and that's incredible. Well, Doug, I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, again, just from this 20-minute conversation, I'm like, let's go run 100 miles right now. I have nothing to complain about. I mean, I don't. Yeah. So I hope people listening to that, if you see Doug at the race, go give him a fist bump. Tell him he's awesome. You know, obviously he's not doing this for that. He's doing this because he wants to live, you know, and this is how he does it. And so, dude, thanks for being on. Thanks for being an inspiration, and best of luck to you. Seriously, man.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going
at least
solo.
Get to that Linfoot hiking.
I'm going solo, buddy.
Yes.
No crew, no pacer, just like
that's
you said.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
You don't need it. You'll live off bacon.
Live off bacon. Thank
All
you
right,
so
buddy.
much.
Thanks for coming on, man. We'll see you soon.
See you next weekend. Thank you.
So everyone who listened to our podcast for the Georgia Death Race this year, I just want to thank you guys. I want to thank Andrew Miller, great kid, great coach. What a badass guy, and appreciate him for coming on. Big shout out to Paul Reynolds for coming on. I hope he gets his fifth finish. So if you're watching this after GDR, hopefully you'll see Paul with a spiffy new jacket with his name on it. Big shout out to my buddy Kevin, who's singing our national anthem before the race. Hope he gets that coveted first finish. I know he's been training hard. And Doug Lynch, the Terminator, the Phoenix, you're just an awesome human. Great story. I really hope you get a finish and come full circle with your just imperiling story of just how, I mean, I can't even relate and imagine all that stuff. So to everybody else, we hope to see you following this race live. If you go to our website, runbumtours.com. We'll have a live tracking link on there. You can follow everybody. We use the same timing and software that UTMB, the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, uses. We're going to be timing at 7 of the 9 aid stations, I believe, plus the finish line. If you go check out, you can download the Live Trail app. You can follow your favorite runners. You can get a text message, SMS message notifications for certain runners. You can also see their estimated time of arrival to the next point, the next timing point. So you can literally follow the whole race. We're going to try to have some live updates like during the race, but there's not that much cell service up there. So we'll do our best. So your best case for following the race is to follow the Live Trail link that's going to be on runbumtours.com. It will, again, you can follow all the runners, just the elite runners. You can follow just the women, just the men, whatever you want to do. Go interact with that. It is super, super cool. Let's see what else. I guess we will see all the people running and their crews this coming Friday night for our pre-race packet pickup, mandatory packet pickup at Amicalola Falls Lodge in Georgia. I'm really excited. I can't believe 11 years of race directing. This was the first race I ever put on, ever. So every year we put it on. It's right around my birthday. It's just kind of like a happy coming home. And even though we have other races before this in the year, for me, this is like the first, like home court, backyard race, if you will. So everyone who's made this race possible, all the volunteers, the Forest Service, the parks, Byron Herbert Reese, the DOT, all this stuff like that over the years, I just want to thank you so much. My parents, there's so much that goes into this behind the scenes. I'm excited to have my 3 race directors out there. Jim Thomas is coming back to help out this from Colorado. Deanna Doan is one of our new race directors, as well as Ashley Walsh. So really excited. It's going to be an incredible weekend. Fingers crossed for good weather. We'll see you soon.